Welcome back. Kenneth Chesbro, a former lawyer for Donald Trump's campaign, pleaded guilty on Friday to illegally conspiring to overturn Mr. Trump's 2020 election loss in Georgia, becoming the second former Trump lawyer and third defendant to plead guilty in the criminal racketeering case. Chesbro pleaded guilty to a single felony count of conspiracy to file false documents. Former Trump lawyer Sidney Powell and bail bondsman Scott Hall have also accepted plea deals and agreed to testify against others. Joining me now is former Vice President Mike Pence, a Republican candidate for president. Thank you for being here. Welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you, Kristen, and congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to have you here in studio. We're going to get to all of the Trump legal matters in just a moment. I want to start with what's happening in Israel and the Middle East. Look, we know that President Biden has asked for this more than $100 billion aid package, and it's really exposed some divisions within the Republican Party. Former President Trump has said, for example, he doesn't necessarily think we should be writing a blank check to Ukraine. Do you support linking aid to Israel to aid to Ukraine? Is that the right path?
Well, first, I think it's important that American leaders in both parties speak with one voice. If the world knows nothing else, the world needs to know this. America stands with Israel. What happened 2 weeks ago was the most brutal assault on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And we need to stand with Israel as they prepare to do what needs to be done, which is going to require a ground invasion. They're going to have to hunt down and destroy Hamas once and for all. And there's going to be hardship, there's going to be difficulty. But I really do believe this is a moment of where American clarity and leadership is more important than ever. And before you get to the aid question, I also think, look, President Biden said the other night, this is what happens when dictators are not held to account. Well, Kristen, it's also what happens after a disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. It's also what happens after 2 years of appeasement by President Biden with Iran. And I really do believe it's also what happens when voices in my own party have been signaling retreat from the war raging in Ukraine. And even one candidate for president, Vivek Ramaswamy, recently was sounding the retreat in support for Israel. So, I really believe that this is a moment where we need to stand firm. We need to learn the lessons of history, but we need American leadership that's strong and firm and resolute for the sake of Israel, for the sake of peace in Eastern Europe, and for the security of the world.
Very quickly on Ramaswamy, he said overnight there's no clear long-term objective, is a recipe with no clear long-term objective, is a recipe for a no-win war that will be bad for Israel and bad for the U.S. Does he have a point? Is it important to make sure that there's a clear long-term strategy?
What's important is that Israel knows we are with them. I mean, it was about a month ago, Vivek Ramaswamy actually said that we wouldn't send American armed forces into harm's way if Iran attacked Israel. Look, there's that old Bible verse that says, if the trumpet does not sound a clear call, who will know to get ready for battle? I really believe in this moment America has to send a clear call that we will stand with Israel every step of the way as they do what needs to be done. I agree with what one Israeli official said recently. Israel and Hamas cannot coexist. We must support Israel in their effort to crush Hamas and secure their nation. And I will.
And just yes or no, because I do. Do you think that aid to Ukraine and Israel should be linked?
Of course, I've been a very strong supporter of military aid to Ukraine since the invasion.
Would you support linking the aid?
I would support Congress moving that measure together or separately, but I think it's more important what the outcome is. I mean, I just heard the former Speaker of the House say that we need to make sure Israel has what they need, particularly with resupplying Iron Dome and other security apparatus that exist in Israel in their war. And we've been supporting Ukraine, but at the end of the day, look, weakness arouses evil. And I really do believe that if America does not continue to respond to this moment in Eastern Europe and in the Middle East, and to no less extent in the Asia Pacific, with resolute American strength, the balance of the 21st century could look a whole lot more like the first half of the 20th century.
Let me ask you about some of your comments, because you've said U.S. Special Forces should go into the region to rescue American hostages. I just want to be very clear.
Yeah.
you would support putting American boots on the ground to get hostages out?
Kristen, we've got Americans being held by bloodthirsty terrorists in Gaza. And if I was president of the United States, I would have directed the Joint Special Operations Command to stand up Delta Force, to stand up the Navy SEALs, who do the best hostage rescue in the world, and say, you need to work with IDF, and we need to tell Hamas, you've got 12 hours to turn American and Israeli hostages loose, or we're coming to get them. I mean, look, I welcome the release of 2 American hostages this week. I'm grateful for that. But going hand in hand to Qatar and standing by while Hamas decides whether they're going to release another hostage is totally unaccepted. We are the leader of the free world. We are Israel's strongest ally on the planet. We need to send a message to Hamas that you need to turn those hostages back over, or you'll answer not just to Israeli Defense Forces, but you'll answer to the United States Armed Forces.
I do want to ask you about former President Trump's legal challenges. His former lawyers, Sidney Powell, as I just said, and Kenneth Chesebro, have taken plea deals in that Georgia election case. They have agreed to testify against other defendants. Do you believe that this is evidence that the false electors scheme was essentially not defensible?
Well, I must tell you, I know I did my duty on January 6th to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And thanks to the courage of law enforcement, we quelled the violence that day. We reconvened the Congress and completed our work under the Constitution. But this whole business of false electors was something I wasn't aware of at the time. I've learned about efforts afterwards.
You didn't hear any conversations about the false electors at the time?
I just didn't, other than in the press. There was some discussion about people convening for electors. I mean, most of what I was dealing with was that the president and a group of crackpot lawyers that had surrounded him were making the case that I had the authority to reject or return votes back to the states, which no vice president in history had ever asserted or ever should. The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. And I know by God's grace I did my duty that day. The
president told me when I spoke to him last month, Mr. Vice President, that he was calling the shots. He says it was his decision to pursue the false election claims even after he'd lost in court. You have made the case that he was listening to crackpot lawyers, but did he undercut that argument that he was listening to the crackpot lawyers?
No, I was in the room when I saw him doing it. But look, the president is responsible for the decisions that he made and the demands that he made on me. Look, our nation won a revolutionary war against a king, and I knew from the first time I heard a rumor about the vice president being able to reject or return votes to the states that the founders of this country would have never granted one person the ability to decide which votes to be counted. But the president chose to believe that. He still believes it. He still stands by that, as do many of his supporters. But I must tell you, as I travel around the country, there's not a day that goes by that someone from literally every walk of life doesn't come up to me at an airport or at a diner or at a pizza place and just thank me for what we did that day. And I always tell them it was God's grace that gave us the strength.
Let me ask you about your travels around the country, because you just released your fundraising, which has trailed behind a number of your competitors. Of course, you have been struggling in the polls. Mr. Vice President, if you don't qualify for this next debate, will you drop out of the race?
Well, we're working really hard to qualify for the debate. And it's going to be down in Miami. Lots of people are going to MikePence2024.com and making a contribution to give us the numbers in contributions that we need to qualify. But, I will tell you, look, I don't have the most money in this campaign, but I do have the most experience. I mean, it's the reason why I'm running, Kristen. I mean, when Karen and I thought through this over the last 2 years, I reflected on the fact that I think this country's in a lot of trouble. I think Joe Biden has weakened America at home and abroad. It's become more clear around the world in recent weeks. And here at home, a crisis at our border, a crime wave in our major cities, families struggling in the worst inflation in 40 years. And when I looked at my experience, not just as vice president, But as a governor of a successful conservative state, as a leader in the Congress of the United States, we thought of that other verse. It says, to whom much is given, much will be required. And we stepped forward out of a sense of duty. And it's carrying that message, bringing that experience forward that gives us great confidence that we're going to continue to drive forward in this campaign and continue to marshal the support of people all across the country.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.